This is another video in the series that I've been doing recently on one topic at a time. There is a one topic series already, but this is separate from that because the other one was more geared toward just a basic walkthrough of a Christian life, and this one is more on the apologetic side, this series, and it's taken from the main website that you'll find linked in the video description that has a To the Point series, and so that's the name of this video and the others in this series. And this one is on evolution, as you can see. So we'll just get right to it with the claims and responses. If you haven't seen the other videos, I'm going in alphabetical order. So the first one is atheism, the second one was Calvinism, and this one is evolution, which, if I hadn't been going alphabetically, it would have been right after the atheism one. But those two are related. You might want to watch the other one first. It doesn't really matter. But so the format is to do a claim and a rebuttal. And the first claim on evolution, and these are not in any particular order of importance, just things that I've encountered in discussions with people over the decades in message boards. First claim is natural selection is one of the mechanisms of evolution. I understand not everyone claiming to believe in evolution believes every point in here. I'm not trying to address every individual variation on, what anyone would call evolutionary theory or atheism or any of those things. I'm talking about general principles that I've encountered in my discussions. So there is a claim that is made by many evolutionists that natural selection is one of the mechanisms of evolution. My response to that would be that selection, by its nature, means to remove a subset of what already exists and discard the rest, not create something new. This is one way in which bacteria, quote-unquote, develop resistance to antibiotics. The drugs kill off the competition from the bacteria that already had immunity. So what you do is you just kill off the ones that were vulnerable, and so the ones that were already not vulnerable don't have other bacteria to contend with, so they're going to be multiplying easily, and so that's how you get antibiotic resistance. And I know that's an oversimplification, but, people do this with everything that theists believe, so why not? Anyway, selecting means to take something from a set that already exists and get rid of things. So you're reducing the gene pool, basically, when you're talking about biology. So that's not helping evolution at all. The next claim, mutation, is another mechanism. Mutation removes functionality, which is another way that some bacteria, quote-unquote, develop immunity to antibiotics. They are devolving like everything else. The fruit fly experiment ended in failure. Deliberate multi-generational mutation only produced bizarre fruit flies, never horse flies, house flies, dragonflies, much less horses, houses, or dragons. So mutation, like selection, is an enemy of evolution. It reduces complexity. It does not increase it. Consider also the problem of getting mutated characteristics into the gametes where they can be passed on. No learned skill can be encoded in them that anyone can prove, and the mutation will not be passed on unless a mate with the same mutation is found, and they produce very viable offspring, and the offspring marry each other to keep the mutation going. Excuse me. The odds of favorable mutations that don't render the offspring sterile are extremely small, but they get orders of magnitude smaller when applied to developing gills into lungs, for example. So a lot of blind faith is required at every step along the way and on a path that unguided processes cannot follow. In other words, if you have mutation, even in the fruit fly experiment, they were trying to go a certain direction, which evolution it does not do in nature as far as the theory is concerned. There is no direction, there is no purpose, there is no goal in unguided processes. There is no guide. So even with guided processes, the result was that you just get bizarre fruit flies. You don't change them into some other kind of living thing. The next claim, given enough time, anything can happen. So basically, time can turn frogs into princes. This is magic, not science. Statistically, an unguided process always results in no net gain. It winds up in equilibrium. This is illustrated by the famous coin flipping experiment. If you ever took a statistics class, you did this. It was very boring, but it proved the point. The more trials you have, the closer you get to equilibrium, meaning no gain in either direction. The more times you flip that coin, the closer you get to 50-50 heads and tails. So time is yet another enemy of evolution. The more time passes, the closer we get to no evolution at all. Therefore, if the universe is billions of years old, we should all be back to pond scum by now. In other words, nothing should be changing anymore after this much time, because every time there's a new generation, the coin is flipped again, and so you get closer and closer to no net gain or loss. So you just get stagnant. That's what billions of years of coin flipping does. And then since there's no process of no guide, no goal, then it is coin flipping. So the more you do it, the less evolution you get. So we've had 3 claims so far: natural selection, mutation, and time, and all 3 work against evolution. The next claim: evolution is only concerned with change over time, not origins. The rebuttal: evolution must believe in matter from non-matter and life from non-life. It has no choice, and it is hypocritical for evolutionists to insist that creationists explain where God came from, while they exempt themselves from explaining where the first life or the singularity came from. If you can't explain the beginning, you have no right to claim absolute knowledge of what happened since then in prehistory. Next claim: there is likely to be life everywhere in the universe. This proves that regardless of the odds, life does rise from non-life quite often. Rebuttal: first, this has only been predicted, not observed. Second, the more life is found on other planets, the more absurd the theory of abiogenesis becomes. This again is a belief in magic and miracles that disregards observation and probability. How can belief in an intelligent designer be less rational? The reason it becomes more absurd is because look at the astronomical odds of life evolving here in one place. To say it happens millions of times over is to say that you believe in magic, because the odds are so bad, there's essentially no chance at all. So the more they go looking for life on these alleged other planets, the less likely it is to be found, because evolution is itself, even in one instance on one planet, a miracle and an act of magic. Next claim: science will eventually have all the answers. A rebuttal: time to the rescue again. Eventually, faith in the future of science, even though they don't always make too much progress, and we can see from archaeology that there's been a lot of past civilizations that were very advanced. So where is this unbroken line of progress? The more science discovers, the less likely it becomes that answers about origins or alleged evolution will come. The smallest living cells, once thought to be simple and primitive, are now known to be incredibly complex biological factories of ingenious design. But this is blind faith in naturalism. And if evolutionists can have faith in them, then so can creationists. We know through archaeology that history has not been a steady climb from ignorance and simplicity to knowledge and complexity. There are ancient civilizations whose technology still surpasses our own. So here again, there is no unbroken progression. There is no guiding process. We don't just keep getting better. So time is also not a magic wand for evolution. The next claim: the present is key to the past, but as just explained in the previous point, the past has been very different from the present. So this is not a scientific statement anyway. Science can only examine the present. It requires forensics or legal evidence to examine the past. Evolution also fails to face the insurmountable odds of symbiotic evolution, such as flowers and bees, to think that these interdependencies evolved in perfect synchronization or synchrony, I don't know if that's a real word or not, but I used it at the time, over millions of years, is at least as absurd as anything proposed by creationists. In other words, if you have so many dependencies in nature, then those things that depend on each other have to evolve in pace together. So this again raises the odds to absurdity. Next claim: design is only an illusion, something we presume because we're designers. Rebuttal: how can people look at something like the space station or even a jetliner today and say that's design, that's evidence of design, but look at us, the designers, the people who designed it, and say accident? This is the fallacy called special pleading. It is completely arbitrary. That is to say, you make an exception when it suits you to say whether you think something is designed or not. How did evolutionists ever expect to use SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, to detect an intelligent signal from space when they refuse to define what constitutes intelligent? And the laws of physics and nature are designs of their own. Which came first, the laws or the matter they act upon? Evolution does not have, never can have, and flatly refuses to have an answer. It cannot account for information encoding, which requires a sender and receiver who both know the code. That's what DNA is all about, for example. And it's in every living thing, some form of that. So it's just the double standard, the hypocrisy of saying that here's a machine, it was clearly designed by an intelligent human, but the humans who designed it are allegedly accidents just because they're biological. This is fallacious. Next claim, naturalism is unbiased and therefore superior to supernaturalism. People are always saying, like they did in comments on my atheism video, that should be the default position. But why should it be? Naturalism is anti-science because it limits the interpretation of data and presumes outcomes before the experiment has begun. Take the dating of ancient artifacts or life, for example. Evolution must first presume the scale, which is very long periods of time, the magic wand, and then discard or adjust any anomalies in measurement which were unwanted or unexpected. Yet even a child knows you don't measure oven temperature with a body thermometer. The scale is way off, in spite of both being thermometers. But when the scale is unknown, a truly scientific approach would be to use a wide variety of scales. So one must presume long ages before choosing a long age scale. And if it is objected that certain decaying properties tell us the scale, the response is that all such techniques begin with assumptions, not observations. And there's a website called Science Against Evolution, all one word, and I think it's .info, but I think other endings will get you there too. Science Against Evolution will go into more detail about these such things as radiometric dating, if you wanted to go down that road. So I would conclude, after all those claims and rebuttals on evolution, as follows. I'm still waiting for someone to explain how flowers and bees and numerous other codependencies all evolved in perfect synchronization for millions of years without fail, or how selection creates new information when to select means to take a subset of what already exists, or how an unguided process can never have a net gain in any direction. Statistically, it's no different from flipping a coin. Or how learned skills can be encoded into the gametes in at least one male and one female, so the next generation inherits it. Or how mutation can account for evolution when every experiment has failed to even begin to turn one organism into another, such as the fruit fly experiment, which only ever produced mutated fruit flies. As with its partner atheism, evolution is a blind faith, and it exempts itself from scrutiny on questions it cannot answer. It's also an unfalsifiable theory, since no discovery is ever deemed sufficient to debunk it. Instead, the theory simply evolves and is thus unscientific. That's the definition of falsifiable, means that you can devise a way that would debunk it if such an experiment were conducted and was successful. So since no discovery will ever be admitted as proof against evolution, then it is unfalsifiable, and by definition that makes it an unscientific theory. The coelacanth was one example of that. They call it a living fossil. As I got a little ahead of myself on my writings here. Despite the discovery of viable blood cells in the bones of dinosaurs, or the discovery of primitive animals such as the coelacanths, which are alive today, despite the discovery of the amazing complexity of life at the most basic level, the theory itself is clung to like a security blanket. Peer review is controlled and guarded by evolutionists, as also are the universities. Even some of their own proponents now admit that true scientific discovery has been hijacked by a religious scientism, much like the prevailing view of the scientific community with whom the Roman Catholic Church sided against Galileo. So if you go back to that incident, here again the Church was siding with prevailing science, not against true science. Okay, not with true science, I mean to say. I said that backwards. They were against true science. They were going with the mainstream, and the same thing is true today, and everybody goes along with mainstream science against true science, and even they admit it. So what's going on here is they find all these things like viable blood cells in alleged dinosaur bones, and things they dub living fossils, which is an oxymoron. If it's a fossil, it's supposedly extinct, and yet if you find one, that should have falsified the theory. This is the so-called rabbit in the Cambrian argument. And yet they have already stated, many of them, that no matter what is ever discovered, as they've shown in the past so far, they will not abandon their theory, which makes it unfalsifiable and unscientific. Now, at the end here of this article, you'll find linked in the description, there are numerous other articles that, and here's one to that site I mentioned, Science Against Evolution, all sorts of other sites about the Ark and the Flood, and creation scientists who are not necessarily Christians. In fact, I don't know that very many of them are on this list. Things about other scientific theories that don't see the light of day or the peer review because they don't match the mainstream. It's not because they're not real science. So go ahead and pursue those links. I'm not doing these things to debate these issues. I'm doing them to inform. So if you'd like to debate, you can find plenty of debate channels on that. So that's all I have to say about this topic, and thanks for listening.